Saturday afternoon. And our theme this year is irreversibility, eyes to the stars. And with that idea of eyes to the stars, we do have a theme this week that has an astrological reference, and that is the theme of Aquarian humanity. And something that our speaker for today is my husband, Cliff Tillotson, and something that he and I have long studied is called the Aquarian axioms. And every once in a while in our Still and Moving Center Almanac, we use one of the 10 Aquarian axioms as one of our quotes. So you may be familiar with some of these, and this may be the first time in your reading package for today that you've seen all 10 of them put together. So I'd like to introduce Cliff as a student of life and a student of something that might be called the Gupta Vidya, and that has to do with the ancient science, and the ancient science of spirituality might be one way of putting it. And I'll just give it over to you at this point, Cliff.
Okay. See on gallery. Yeah, maybe I'll just do a few little comments, and then I'm really looking forward to the conversation on this subject of Aquarian humanity. And so I thought after my comments, maybe we could just read those Aquarian axioms, because they're really some good seed ideas that could help stimulate the conversation. There's 10 of them, so I'm going to volunteer 3 of you. How about Diana, could you read the first 3? Sharoni, can you read the next 4? And Elizabeth, can you read the last 3? And Renee will put them up on the screen after I'm done doing my little thing.
Okay.
Okay.
I actually hope that Sharoni will put them up.
Or Sharoni, can you put them up after I'm done? And then we'll just read those, and then we'll jump into the conversation, okay?
Okay.
Okay. I keep
Okay.
going out of gallery. Okay, there we go. So first up, Renee wanted to approach this subject from the wisdom tradition called Gupta Vidya. And kind of Gupta Vidya kind of means hidden wisdom or whatever. But what it points to from the theosophical tradition is that behind all the wisdom traditions of the world, of humanity, there is like a strain or a line of universal ideas and teachings that come from these teachers that are connected to one another, that all the great teachers of humanity are all in some way connected, and therefore their teachings are, while they are distinct in their own cultures and time, there's a universality and a commonality amongst them. I was thinking of this statement by Krishna in the Gita that he said he incarnates from age to age for the preservation of the just, the destruction of the wicked, and the establishment of righteousness. And it's these teachers and guides who help us through to navigate our own evolution and self-growth through the various ages. And the Aquarian age is the age that we are just kind of like on the threshold of entering. Before this age, there was the Piscean age. And then, according to some experts on the matter, we entered the Aquarian age in the year 1902. And as the song Aquarius kind of suggested, the Aquarian age is an age of enthusiasm. It's an age of vision, of promise, of hopefulness for humanity. But it's also an age where mental structures of the past, of the Piscean age, are going to be dissolved or through the waters of Aquarius, broken down, and new thought forms and new ideas are going to be coming that are going to be more expansive for human consciousness. One such idea that I've read recently is taking on more traction in the scientific community is the idea of panpsychism, in which everything in the universe, everything in the world is conscious. There is intelligence behind every single aspect of nature, both inanimate and animate. And science is seeing more and more telltale signs that there is consciousness imbued even in stones and rocks and so forth, and as well as everything else. And I think this idea of a deepening or sense of being able to see the workings of intelligence and consciousness wherever we are, throughout our days and so forth, is a mark of being an Aquarian. It's interesting that right after the Aquarian age started in 1902, in 1903, the Wright brothers did the first human flight. It was only 120 feet long. Doesn't seem like much now, but at the time it was a big deal, obviously, because it's the first time anyone did it. And then it's also interesting that it was in 1935, only 33 short years later, that Pan Am did the first commercial flight from the mainland to Hawaii. Only 33 years later. But what a radical transformation human flight was for Hawaii in terms of its relationship to the rest of the world. I mean, before that, the only way you could get to Hawaii was by a ship. And it's interesting, I'm thinking a little bit this idea that the Aquarian age is a breaking down of forms. Often that can be somewhat violent, and then establishing it of new forms, which may hinder back to some more harmonious ways of living in the past. And we just had a tragedy, here in Hawaii, in Lahaina, and so many people lost their lives, lost their homes. It was just a massive tragedy. But sometimes you have to ask, is there something deeper at work here? And Lahaina was the capital, was the place that people came, the missionaries came, and then also the whalers. It was where and there was quite a bit of clashing going on between the whalers and the missionaries. They did not see eye to eye. But they brought their own way of doing things. And I'm thinking, actually, there's this idea, and I'll come back to it later, that one of the things about entering into the Aquarian age has to do with the idea of integration, a human being integrating themselves into the community, and also humanity integrating itself into nature. Whereas with the way I understand it, and I get a little bit of this history of Lahaina, Mary, from Malea, that prior to the missionaries and the whalers coming, Lahaina was a wonderful place. It had all this sustainable agriculture as well as fisheries, and the people in Lahaina were living very much in harmony with nature. But then it kind of shifted, and it dried up in a way and became more vulnerable to fire, which happened. But it's all, in some ways, the whalers came and they didn't come to bring anything. They came to extract whales from the area. And then the missionaries too, in a large extent, rather than in many ways trying to integrate Christian teachings with the Hawaiian values, often tried to just impose Christianity upon the Hawaiian culture. And that's true even today, a little bit in Niihau. But the idea of integration seems really central. And then recently with Lahaina, the kind of the imposition of tourism on that it almost, to me, when I would go to Lahaina, it was almost like going a little bit to Disneyland. And I love Lahaina. And I'm thinking, though, there's a lot of rethinking going on about how to rebuild Lahaina. And I think a lot of that thinking is to be more sustainable, more in harmony with nature, more in deference and respect for Hawaiian culture and early Hawaiian culture. And I hope those ideas prevail in the rebuilding of Lahaina, and that would be very Aquarian if they did. So I just throw that out there for thought. I'd like to read a paragraph from this essay, this symbol essay that was on Aquarius. That this woman, Helen, I forgot her last name right now, Renee, Helen
Valborg.
Valborg wrote. And in the second paragraph of the essay, she says, Aquarius represents the ideal toward which humanity is moving. The name itself is a haunting reminder of the hopes for a better world that many bury along with their all too fleeting youth. The age of Aquarius seems to hesitate in its dawning, whetting the longings of a world-weary generation. But no thoughtful observer of nature's process could presume that a new birth, transcending these limiting expectations, would take place until the old dead forms had disintegrated and become mere compost for the future. It has been known since ancient times that Aquarius was bound up with destruction and rebirth. This is why the water bearer is linked with the great floods and with him who rides out the deluge and lays down the seed of a new order. So maybe we could ask, what would be the marks of an Aquarian? And I think this idea of being a water bearer, someone who brings water, is healing. There's a lot of people wear a hat that says salt water heals here in Hawaii. It's nourishing. It's used in baptisms, but it's also can dissolve things too. But I think, another mark of being Aquarian is also being a light giver, bringing light into the world, bringing hopefulness into the world. There's another paragraph in here that I also wanted to read that talks about how perhaps the Aquarian age is an age of self-transformation. And she talks about a vision or a story or a myth here where she's talking about these two vases. And she says the upper vase was beautifully sculpted of translucent amber and filled with a shimmering liquid. The lower vase was fashioned of crude earthenware and contained dark and muddy water. A hand appeared and gently tilted the amber vase, allowing its luminous contents to pour gently into the clay jug below. The waters mingled, and wherever the shimmering liquid fell, the dark fluid seethed and boiled. Bubbles rose and burst upon the surface in many colors, while the murky waters slowly began to change. Gradually, with steadily altering aspect, the waters became as clear and pellucid as the contents of the amber vessel. So in some ways, it's a beautiful image of self-transformation that from the higher vessel, the lower vessel of, say, our more material vestures can be slowly purified by this pouring of higher thought and consciousness into it. So I think one of the marks also of an Aquarian is the ability with the senses to use the senses to probe deeper into the world we live in. The idea that's often come up in the GEMS meetings about deep listening. I've heard that said numerous times in our conversation group, this idea of deep listening. There's also, I think, the idea of touch, being able to use the sense of touch in a deeper way. I mean, if you meet someone who is suffering or struggling, if sometimes you just give them a little pat on the back, a little reassurance, it goes a long, long way. So using that sense of touch in a healing manner, I think is a very Aquarian thing. Someone else recently told me that they had this experience of that the deeper self almost has a certain aroma to it, a certain smell to it. I never thought of that, but it was an interesting idea that the sense of smell too can be heightened. But I'm also thinking of the sense of sight and the ability to see deeper, to be really attentive with one's eyes and get it, especially in nature, the nuances of nature. And Renee knows I've been kind of going gaga about this poet named Mary Oliver. I've been just loving her poetry. And what she has been doing for me is kind of taking me out in nature and helping me see deeper. And I think the idea of being able to see deeper in nature requires us to go deeper in ourselves in order to be able to see deeper in nature. And I thought I'd read one of her prose poems because I think it's very much in, and her poems are very short and simple, but I think it has something to do with being Aquarian. And because right now we're dealing with very troubled times in America as well as the world, what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And, you know, you pretty much look anywhere and go, oh my God, it's terrible. So this poem kind of speaks to that. And it's called Don't Hesitate. And I think it has one of Mary Oliver's most famous lines in it at the very end of the poem. And she says, if you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give into it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. And there's still a movie center is all about joy. So those are just a few thoughts just to get us going. But Renee, can you put those up? And then I think you were first, right, Diana?
Yes.
And then Sharoni, and then Elizabeth, the last. So 3, 4, 3. Or Sharoni, can you put them up?
Thank you, Sharoni.
Aquarium axioms. Life is built up by the sacrifice of the individual to the whole. Each cell in the living body must sacrifice itself to the perfection of the whole. When it is otherwise, disease and death enforce the lesson. 2. Harmony is the law of nature. That was interesting. Harmony is the law of life. Discord its shadow. Whence springs suffering, the teacher, the awakener of consciousness. 3. What? 3. To obtain the knowledge of self is a greater achievement than to command the elements or to know the future.
4. Self-knowledge is unattainable by what men usually call self-analysis. It is not reached by reasoning or any brain powers. 5. Real self-knowledge is the awakening to consciousness of the divine nature of man. 6. Will creates intelligently, desire blindly and unconsciously.
7. Go ahead, Elizabeth. Sharoni, do 7 as well.
7. When desire is for the purely abstract, when it has lost all trace of thing, of self, then it has become pure. 8.
Oh, Elizabeth.
Oh.
Now it's Elizabeth.
Spirituality is not what we understand by the words virtue and goodness. It is the power of perceiving formless spiritual essences. 9. The discovery and right use of the true essence of being. This is the whole secret of life. 10. You cannot build a temple of truth by hammering dead stories. Its foundation must precipitate themselves like crystals from the solution of life. Wow, every one of those is worth a whole hour of thought.
It's actually by hammering dead stones. You cannot build a temple of truth by hammering dead stones.
Yeah, I like that one. And I like precipitating it from like crystals from the solution of life. It's like your metaphor that you spoke of earlier, where the light liquid pours onto the mud.
It's a wonderful image. I love that too. The idea of precipitating like crystals from the solution of, I love that.
Mhm.
Anyways,
know-
that's the conversation. We're done.
No, we're not done. You're just signing off as the presenter and becoming part of the whole group.
Exactly.
I wanted to explain to people there's a way that you can both see the screen with these Aquarian axioms on it and see the other people. And there's something that works kind of like a sliding window, and it's got a little handle in the middle of your screen, and you can slide it so you see less or more of the people and more or less of the screen with the writing. So depending on which one you want to make bigger, you can slide it, and then you can see that better. So I think we're open now to any comments or questions that people might have regarding this idea of Aquarian humanity. And I do want to mention that last year, our entire theme for 2023 was the humanity of the future. So, you know, this is a very good kind of sequel, so to speak, in terms of a week's theme to talk about Aquarian humanity. The cycles are, somewhere around 2,200, 2,500 years long. So if we just went into the Aquarian age in 1902, we're still, like Cliff says, at the threshold. We've just tiptoed into the beginning of a pretty long cycle in time. And so what comes to mind with what Cliff has said so far, and what you might read here? Yeah, Diana.
Well, I had trouble reading the second one, so I had to read it over several times by myself. And it says, harmony is the law of life, discord its shadow. When springs suffering, the teacher, and the awakening of consciousness. And I think that really speaks to the destruction and the discord of the shadow that sometimes is what happens, because if we're all in harmony, we feel like everything's okay and we don't grow necessarily. And it's in the destruction. I'd like to say it's different, but it's in the destruction comes the teacher, the suffering, and the awakening of consciousness. And it's out of that suffering that we push ourselves to grow, or that we seek new answers. And I hope and I pray that that's what's happening in our world right now, because there is so much suffering, and yet there are many people that are really working on trying to find answers and trying to spread harmony and joy as well. So that really struck me, because I had trouble reading it, and I thought, okay, what is that, you know? And I don't like that the idea that the discord is in shadow and that's what everything springs from, but in my experience, that's probably the truth. And the second one that struck me was real self-knowledge is the awakening of consciousness of the divine nature of man. And I would put of everything. And that would be my word. And I think they go together, because this is the awakening of a consciousness of the divine nature of everything comes from when we can let go of the old wounded stories and the old stones, and start looking to a new way of being, and not just what we have been programmed to believe.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great follow up on the one of Cliff's first comments about Aquarian humanity as being able to recognize the consciousness, the intelligence that pervades everything, even rocks and stones, everything. Yeah. And to me, also your first comment, Diana, it is really, for some reason, comforting to me to think of suffering as the awakener of consciousness, because we all go through suffering. It's not something any of us are going to avoid. It's part of the nature of being incarnated into a human body and a human mind, a human emotional nature to experience suffering at some points, and just to know, well, this is actually an opportunity for me to awaken to some deeper truth that I don't really have right now. What could that be?
Well, it's interesting because the first noble truth of Buddhism is life is suffering. And the reason we suffer is we want it to be different. And I think if we really look at that, if we look at our suffering and then we look at what's happening and then we want it to be different, we can either stay in the suffering or we can do things to make sure that there is a change of what is causing the suffering. Just an idea. I hadn't thought about it that way, but I like that idea.
So kind of a radical acceptance of what is. Now what do I do from here? Yeah.
Well, speaking of suffering, Cliff, so many lovely things you said, and I made notes as you were talking, but the first thing I want to say is one of the only lines from poetry I know is from a Mary Oliver poem, and it speaks to suffering. And it is, as best I remember it, is, "You do not have to walk on your knees 100 miles in the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves." And there we go with how to get out of suffering is exactly what Cliff was talking about in integrating humanity again, or reintegrating ourselves properly with nature and in loving, caring, sharing community. And that's obviously the way to go. I loved hearing you say that it was 33 years from the beginning of the age of Aquarius to the first Pan Am flight to Hawaii. And that was in 1935. Well, I came in at the very beginning of 1936 as a double Aquarius. And so that's what this life has been about. And the essay you read spoke to old forms becoming compost for the future. And I couldn't help but think that unfortunately so much of the infrastructure and plastics and all that we've built don't make good compost. So how are we gonna, steel will corrode and eventually go back to earth, and so will concrete. But this huge invention of non-biodegradable, non-truly recyclable plastics is something that we simply must stop. And stop, well, so many things that you said, and I don't want to hog the conversation here, but harmony, yes, of course. And again, I like to distinguish between dialogue, from the Greek dialogos. Through the word we reach harmony in friendly dialogue. And it's different from discussion and debate, which are separative, taking things apart and arguing with each other and having winners and losers, rather than really listening deeply to each other's perspectives. I make a point of spending time almost every day now with someone who's politically very opposite to me, and finding the common ground. And we have found it in saving baby birds together. we discovered, our mutual love of nature. And so there's always, those discoveries are very important for holding that center for us, where we can agree to disagree. And we have to do that now. We have to understand nature's diversity, and then the crystals forming. It reminds me of how ecosystems, when they've been destroyed, they are recreated, not one primal being that evolves into a whole diverse ecosystem again, but beings popping up all over the ground that was devastated, and then weaving their, going through their immature youth, where they may duke it out for a while, and then learning that big secret of nature, that feeding your enemies is cheaper than killing them, and then moving into the mature phase. But we'll never again have top-down authoritarian governance for the whole world, which is what the empire buildings are still trying to do. That's just the caterpillar trying to hang on. What we're doing now is all of us being imaginal cells, and all of these things that are happening all over the world, raising consciousness, forming community. All that is what thrills me, to see that we're learning to take care of each other in the midst of the biggest global crises we've ever faced. So, enough.
Thank you. Eddie, did you have something you wanted to add in?
No, I'm loving it, all this stuff. Like I also this phrase about compost hit me as well. Working on a farm, and it's we think about, like, generally we think about like the end of something or death of something as being bad, but that's actually a really important part of of bringing new life. And so, like, like just the process of decomposition, it like feeds the future generations. And so, like, this idea, like you have to let go of things for the past to have new growth. You just hold on to something that's maybe a long dead idea, or a long, but you're actually not putting to use, not letting it decompose. You're preserving it, in some kind of cryostasis sort of thing. Then it's not actually giving back. So that decomposition is really important, and giving it, like this idea of light and oxygen and water all mixing together creates this, like, helps that process go. So it's like this new way of thinking, or this maybe it's an old way of thinking about death and decomposition. I like this idea of compost. That's all.
Yeah,
Well,
that's an interesting idea, to really be conscious of composting what we're letting go of. It's different from letting go of it, letting it just slide into the past and never think about it again. What you're suggesting is we let go of it, we bring light to it, we bring oxygen to it, we bring water to it, all these things to help it break down and to become the nutrients for new life.
Yeah.
That's a different way of letting go than I've really thought of in the past.
Nice.
It's a much more conscious way of letting go, I think. I think actually I generally let go and go, whew, I don't have to think about that anymore. And then maybe if I could see like how elements of some dead idea, some idea that I used to have about the way the world is that breaking down, but maybe there are little elements of that idea that didn't work anymore as a whole, but maybe little elements I can preserve into a newer concept of the world that makes more sense now, given my new, wiser perspective. Robert? Nice to see you there in Santa Barbara.
Yes. Talking about life, I noticed that in these axioms that on the one hand, you have life built up by sacrifice, and you have harmony is the law of life. But there's also that the secret of life is the discovery and the right use of the true essence of being. That's the secret of life. So I'm just wondering if anybody had any ideas about this secret of life. Elizabeth, I mean, we all know in some sense that true love is a secret of life of some sort. But how does that relate to the true essence of being? Anyway, I wondered what other people's thoughts were about that.
Yeah, really good question.
It's incommunicable.
Yeah, you mean it's up to yourself? You got to figure it out yourself?
I guess that the closest I've come to that, Robert, is the keyboard model, which is really out of Taoism, out of Taoist science, because Taoism is about how to fit the human into the whole cosmos. And it's that matter, energy, spirit, recognizing that that is a continuum of vibrations that we are, all of that, from the slowest vibrations of the physical all the way up into the purest source consciousness. And that only from the physical bodies can you reach it all. So in a way, it's like, it's the whole keyboard. It's what self-creating universe, cosmos does. It expresses itself as all of those things. And within that, you can have harmonies and disharmonies and all that. But the pure essence to me is knowing all of it, knowing that you from right here can be the whole universe. And the whole universe can be in you. Those kinds of images are what to me is true essence.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting. It gives a very broad view of harmony as the law of life.
A dissonance always resolves into harmony. How many musical pieces do that intentionally to play up the dissonance in order to resolve back into harmony? Harmony is the ultimate truth, is that harmony, that love that you mentioned. But the play isn't boring.
Yeah, and
I mean,
it's no soap drama either. Because, as has been mentioned, remarkable amounts of pain involved. Even if it's not affecting one itself at the time, as Cliff mentioned, the world is an immense suffering.
Yeah, my basic principle of the universe is anything that can happen will happen. And that's the challenge for us, is to look at all that crazy stuff that we're doing now. You know, these are the empire buildings at their last gasp, hanging on. You know, we can't take the toys from the boys. We can't get rid of the weapons that permit warfare very easily, but we do know that that's all unsustainable, that it will not last. So if we keep that courage up and spread the love, that only love can triumph, like only light can dispel darkness, right? That's the only way to do it. So it shows us that, you know, the universe is broad, and everything will happen somewhere in it. And then we get the challenge of resolving all dissonance back to harmony.
Carolyn, I see your hand up.
I'm always struck by the 10th axiom. You cannot build a temple of truth by hammering it with dead stones. It seems so important. First, why not? Or maybe that should be the last question. Why doesn't hammering, metaphorically speaking, any situation or person with dead stones, why doesn't it work? And so we do need to think that out. And sometimes we do in a encounter. We realize that what we were, you know, that we were trying to maybe out of um, pride or just anger or whatever, we create more problems. We don't arrive at or discover a temple of truth. And then the most important question, which I think to think about, well, how do you build a temple of truth? What is it that particularly if you don't know really what truth is, or what it is you're really trying to build. And that's complicated. Maybe it takes a lot of patience to discover what it is that will bring about some experience or perception of truth. And it does, there have been several comments about harmony. It does seem that creating a field of harmony is part of exposing or creating a temple of truth, because, and that in itself may take a lot of experiments. It may take some failures and misspeaking, or so if anyone has any ideas about, well, how do you build a temple of truth? What is it that you most need? And, you know, you can think of nonviolence, you can think of openness and to new ideas that aren't particularly yours, just flexibility, maybe seeing in what others, or what's you know, this does seem that being trying to be Aquarian would be part of the process of discovering a temple of truth. And we also need to maybe really recognize that the past is a great teacher. People have mentioned nature is a great teacher, and other human beings. And sometimes you hear from the mouth of a child something being said that just is saturated with wisdom, because they don't have a lot of worldly experience that is suffocating good thought. So that's, to me, that's just really, really, really an important concept and reality to build. And how you do it, I mean, I think there might be myriad of ways, but also when you might need to acknowledge that what you thought was true isn't so true. So there's a learning process there. So anyway, that to me, that's just so provocative what's taught there.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. This idea of a temple of truth. For some reason, before our conversation circle today, this idea of honesty kept arising for me. And when you mentioned little children, that's one of the hallmarks of the speech of little children is it's pretty honest. Like my grandson looking up at me when he was 4 and saying, Renée, you're old. And really that was quite that was I mean I had to say yes, well, especially like compared to you, I'm a lot older. And then just like that catching myself looking in the mirror every once in a while and going, who's that? Oh, yeah, that's what I look like now. That was a real moment of honesty for me. And I think like really very deliberately, consciously facing that, I don't look the same as I used to. And can you get over that, Renée? Is that okay? Can you deal with that? And really having to like, maybe men don't have to do this so much. Maybe it's more a woman thing, or maybe it's just my thing, but this is something I had to consciously face and be honest with myself, and it's not going to get any better. So let's get with the program, that things are different now on the outside. Let's just be honest about that. So anyway, that's an my dominant thought is honesty. It may be the key, a key to this building of Temple of Truth.
Well, the one of the Aquarian things is, questioning and thinking. Like there you have one of those aphorisms: will creates intelligently. So not being always running around by blind desire, impulse, infatuation, questioning, asking questions, and but doing that in terms of this idea of the whole, trying to think in terms of life as a whole, holistically. And that's been a theme, God, since the 60s, right? Is to try to think of
Aquarian song.
Yeah, right. Holistically. And so you have holistic medicine, and you start to incorporate, like, just in health, that you incorporate at the Still Moving Center all kinds of elements that have to do with health. So that's obviously a much more holistic view than a 1950s view would have been. So questioning, thinking, but in terms of the whole, and also in terms of certain fundamental truths that one's learned about life.
Thank you. Yes. Eddie.
I was just thinking about this, these ideas that Cliff was proposing about using our senses, because I just think I've been thinking about this a lot recently, that we have the capability to really see, to hear, to smell, to but we miss so much of it because of what we want, what we're imposing on what we see or hear, or, you know, so that we only pick out or we look for, you know, and so this idea of truth that you were saying and honesty, you have to first start from that point of view of really taking in what is there, seeing fully, taking the time to actually let it to receive it. Because I mean, here, you know, up on the North Shore, I meet a lot of people that say like, oh, I'm interested in permaculture, or I want to, you know, listen to nature, but they don't, because they have a deadline. They've got to, you know, their busy lives, and they're like, oh, you know, I'm going to put in a pond here. I'm going to, you know, this is how it's going to be. And, you know, but there isn't time to see and look and listen and use your senses, you know, which is you know, which is this like harmony we've all been talking about in nature, which harmony is a relationship. It's not, you know, you have to listen first for you to be able to actually know, you know, what that melody is, to harmonize with it, so that, you know, to use your senses to be able to fully take in what is actually there. Take the time for it, because this culture is not about taking time. So you have to kind of almost push back against that. Let those other urges that are in your bodies that are saying like, oh no, this has to be at a certain time. This is what people expect of me, or this is what I expect of myself. And then just like stopping for a moment and just, you know, so I really liked what Cliff said about that. So we have those capabilities, but we don't use them. And that's that idea too of that self, like you can't, you're knowing yourself doesn't come from, you know, what humans generally call intelligence, or like, you know, it comes from listening. So anyway, it's really some nice things to think about. Thanks.
And it sounds to me as if you're using the senses both literally and also metaphorically. So when Cliff mentions deeper listening, that goes beyond what comes straight to the ear, and it goes to the intuitive. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Cliff.
I was still pondering on Robert's question about the axiom number 9 about the discovery and right use of the true essence of being. This is the whole secret of life. It's such a mysterious statement, but I was thinking about it a little bit, that it seems like our senses, you know, if we're controlled by the senses, we're being drawn out into the world, and in many ways being controlled by things without, like with desire. Desire is pulling us outside of ourselves, and then we can get controlled by outer forces or manipulated. And I think also, once we give up on truth, being a seeker of truth, then we're really vulnerable to being manipulated and used in that way. But it seems to me being an Aquarian has to be someone who is using their will to be self-directing, self-governing, and self-choosing, rather than being pulled and by the forces outside of ourselves. So, which really seem to be the case in many cases. I mean, like right now, I think over a third of the United States believes that there wasn't an insurrection. You know, it's like, oh, come on, let's just be honest here. You know, Nancy Pelosi just wrote an article about, let's just call it what it was. It was an insurrection. But in terms of another poem I'd like to read, if that's all right, that has to do with what it means to be an Aquarian and living more in terms of being self-governed, is this wonderful poem by Rudyard Kipling called If. And I think the poem says a lot about what it means to be an Aquarian. So if it's okay, Renee, I'm just going to read this poem, okay?
Yeah, is there any way you can share it with us? It's a
I just have it on piece of paper.
enigma, that poem. Okay.
But I think it has to do with being an Aquarian. So, and being, taking charge of one's own life and not being manipulated or moved from without, but using one's will to guide one through life. So, and I love the first line of this poem, If. And because we're going to be going through, I think, especially in 2024, some really wild times. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make your dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be an Aquarian. I changed the last word.
You'll be a man, my son, right?
But in our case, an Aquarian.
Yeah.
Does it actually end with that you'll be an Aquarian?
No, and you'll be a man, my son.
Well,
But you'll be an Aquarian too.
Thank you, Sharone. I think she found that poem. That is a wonderful poem you just read, Cliff.
Oh, look at that. She pulled it up.
Yeah, she's an Aquarian. She can do these. Mary, do you have something you'd like to add in?
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Cliff. Very thought-provoking. Well, what came to mind for me is this second or third page in the almanac is "We Are the Ancestors of an Age to Come" by Joseph Campbell. And when you were talking about your grandson, it's so true. You know, we change physically, but we also change in our emotions, in our beliefs. I mean, not that they are distorted, but we get a clearer view of what the truth is. And like Cliff was saying, subjective and objective. And the truth is going to be individual to each of us. But we also, by joining this group, I love you guys, you're so wonderful to share, is it fine-tunes some of my ideas. And even if I don't agree, like Diana said, we can, or Elizabeth, we can agree to disagree, because love is the most important thing, and love will get us through. And all of the songs in the 60s and 70s attuned to that also. Amen.
Thank you so much. Well, Cliff, you really got us started on I think a wonderful conversation today on what this might mean to be an Aquarian, part of the humanity of the future as we move in farther into this Aquarian age of ours. What I'd like to do is let you know about next week's topic while somebody prepares to give Cliff a vote of thanks for guiding us today at the beginning of our conversation. Next week, the topic is facing our shadow, which seems somehow to accord with the Aquarian axioms that we were just reading. We're going to look to the literary tradition, to a book called The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, where there's a actual story of an encounter with this wizard with his shadow. To do that, we'll hear from Robin Shepherd on that topic. The following week will be a conversation on the zodiac, and I'll have to announce to you in the future who's going to lead that conversation. So is there anyone who would like to give Cliff a vote of thanks for his presentation today? Eddie. Oh, I think Mom, Nancy. Did you want to say something? I'll let you turn on your microphone. Mom, you need to turn on your microphone. And Sharoni, maybe you could unpin Mary. Let's see, Mom, we're still not hearing you. Maybe there. Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, a lot of the time I had to put my ear right up to the phone because it's not loud enough, but I certainly heard everything, I think. Yesterday, I went to see the film Oppenheimer, and I would certainly recommend people seeing that. But I was thinking of him in relation to some of the things being said. And I think Oppenheimer really had a lot of self-knowledge. And the poem If is, I thought, gee whiz, that's really the impression I got from the movie of the kind of man he was. And I appreciated the whole discussion today. Thank you, Cliff, for introducing it. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you so much. Cliff, that was a fine conversation. And Sharoni, I want to thank you so much for making it possible for all of us to get on. It's really not easy to get out all of these links successfully to each of you. So each of you who signed up and steadfastly use your technology to get on, despite any technological problems you might have had, and Sharoni for getting through technological difficulties to get your links to you. I want to thank everybody for that. It's part of this Aquarian age, I guess, that we get to communicate virtually. The Aquarian age is marked by this idea of vertical ascent, and that's an ascent in consciousness. And I think something about us not being just linked or locked into our locations, which would not allow any of us currently to speak with one another. Nobody is in the same space right now as anybody else. So it's only by this actual communication through the virtual realms that we're able to do this. And I think that's something that we're doing a very good job at using. So thank you all again, and we'll see you next week with the idea of facing our shadow from the literary tradition. Aloha.
Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Aloha.
Happy New Year.
New Year.